Hi, everybody. I'm Ina Garten, and I write cookbooks. I do a television show called Barefoot Contessa for Food Network, and this is my 12th book. It's called Modern Comfort Food, and it's available at Barnes & Noble or barnesandnoble.com. And I'm here with...
Hey guys, I'm John Grisham.
Grisham.
John Grisham, and I have a book. This is A Time for Mercy. It came out back in October. I've been on the virtual book tour now for a couple of months, having a ball. I've been to about 50 bookstores across the country, virtually, of course, and met some wonderful folks. I've done a few for Barnes & Noble, and I'm delighted to be back today with Ina to do another Barnes & Noble sponsored virtual book stop. So hello, Ina, how are you?
It's so nice to talk to you. I think this virtual thing is actually kind of interesting because I find the conversations actually a little more intimate than they were on a stage with a big audience. And I love that people can come from, I mean, I've had events with bookstores that have been literally somebody from every one of the 50 states, which I think is just so great. You don't have to get on a plane. You don't have to check into a hotel and go to the event. You can actually just sit in your living room in your pajamas and have a good time. I've really enjoyed the conversations.
We're all sick of the pandemic, but when it's all said and done, we're going to look back and keep a lot of this stuff. We're going to keep a lot of the things we've learned with the in the virtual world, and especially with book tours, because book tours, I don't know how many you've done over the years. I haven't done many. I stopped many years ago because they're so time consuming and expensive, and it's business travel. And it may sound romantic to, go on a book tour, but it's business travel and it's no fun. It's hotels and taxis and flights and things like that. And so I quit.
And security and going through security and all that nonsense.
Yeah, it's no fun. So we'll be doing virtual book stops for, I hope forever, as long as we keep writing books. I mean, if we keep publishing novels, I hope we get to do this.
So John, I'm going to flatter myself and say we have a few things in common. One is that we've been with our partners, our spouses for decades. Am I right about that?
I'll be 40 years next, Renee and I will be 40 years next May.
Well, your children will be 52 this month, actually. We both write, but I don't begin to think that writing recipes is anything like what you do. We've both had some background in government. I worked in the White House. You were in the Mississippi State Legislature, right?
Yes.
And yours was elected office. But I'll tell you what we don't have in common. You've sold 300 million books. That is astonishing. How do you feel about that? I mean, do you drive down the road on your car and you go, 300 million books?
Never. I see that number, and about every 3 or 4 years, somebody raises that number. I don't know who that person is. I don't know who's doing the counting.
I mean, it's no more than 250 million books.
Probably. But I mean, do we really know how many copies of my books have been sold in South Korea? I mean, we're up to 56 languages. And it's really fun to collect the foreign editions. Every foreign contract I have requires that publisher in Lithuania or wherever to send me 10 copies of that book when it's published. Well, I'm into like 45 books now in 56 languages. That's a lot of foreign editions that nobody around here reads, okay? I tried to give them to the local library, and I said, I've got boxes and boxes of these books that I'm not sure what they're taking up. They're taking over the garage. Can I give them to you? And they said, no, because people who immigrate here do not want to read in their native language. They want to read English.
Oh, how interesting.
So I've got a big shelf in my office here with not behind me here, but one similar of all the foreign editions. And it's kind of neat to look at them every now and then, but around the world, I have no idea what the real number is. Nobody does really. It just sounds good to say. It's 300 million.
What's so wonderful is that people, particularly in a pandemic, but anywhere, you take them into a journey, into a story, and they kind of lose themselves, and they go on that journey with you for an incredible story. And that just must give you enormous satisfaction. I mean, in the way, if I give people a recipe and they make it themselves, it's the reader is involved in the process in a way that, like watching a TV show doesn't do the same thing. I think it's extraordinary.
It's a wonderful journey when you get lost in a book. And I read a lot of books. I start a lot of books. I don't finish a lot of books, but I'm always looking for something good to read. And I get people send me probably publishers and agents and editors and other writers. I probably get 10 books a week just in the mail, and they pile up quickly. And I would love to sit down and try to read or start all of them. I want to read writers who are better than I am. I want to read really good writing, and there are a lot of them. And I have no patience with bad writing. But I'm always looking, and I love that book that can take me away for 3 days to another place, another time. Just get lost in a great book. And the pandemic is initially it was hard to concentrate on the reading. The writing has always been fairly easy to do, but the reading, I caught myself getting distracted and worried and all that kind of stuff. That plus the election and all the politics. But after a while, I realized it was not going to go away anytime soon. So I really made myself kind of buckle down and read a lot. And so that's one big benefit of doing that. I mean, how's it affected you? Your reading and writing?
Well, it's funny. I think that each person should find what they lose themselves in, and that's what they should do professionally. And my guess is you get lost when you're writing more than when you're reading. And I get lost when I'm cooking. So, I mean, that's what I do to make myself happy, and happily, it's what I do professionally. So I get up in the morning, I think, what do I feel like doing today? And that's what I want to do. So I've been, there are weeks when I don't know if it's Tuesday or Thursday or Sunday, because I'm pretty much doing what I do, working on a book or working on recipes. I found the same thing you do, that it's really hard to buckle down and focus on a book. It takes a really good book for me to be able to just sit still for hours at a time.
Yeah.
And I'm actually reading President Obama's book right now, which is, talk about a journey. That was just an incredible journey, and he's such a great writer. You feel like you're in his brain when you're reading it. So that's been great.
I've received 3 copies of it in the last 2 weeks. So I'll get to it eventually. I got a question for you, not about your writing, but about your cooking. Do you cook every day?
Pretty much. I mean, when the pandemic started, because I cook for different reasons. When the pandemic started, all of a sudden I realized I was going to have to make dinner every day. Jeffrey, who is at Yale and writes books, but normally he's gone on Monday and comes back on Friday. And all of a sudden he was here and teaching on Zoom. So I was like, oh my God, I'm going to make lunch every day and dinner every day. And then Kate, my wonderful friend and publicist, suggested that maybe people on Instagram might have questions about what to do with the stuff that they bought at the grocery store in their pantry, and when they didn't know whether they could, go out. And so I sort of asked questions about what's in your pantry that you don't know what to do with, the white beans or whatever it is. And I started having this conversation with people, and I thought, well, every day I'm going to make something from the pantry that I can post on Instagram with the recipe that they can make from whatever they have. And so I was cooking lunch and dinner. I was cooking for Instagram. I was working on a cookbook. And then I started doing videos for TV. So like, to say that I was cooking all the time, it was like constant. It was always something. And then by about May, I was like, I can't do this anymore. So I just kind of took a break, and I decided that it was okay to order out dinner. That was my big concession. But then, I get back to it. So it's fine. I do. Do you write every day? Do you have a schedule like writers sometimes do?
Yeah. When I'm writing, I start writing a new book, a new legal thriller every year on January the 1st. That's just.
Oh, is that what your schedule is? Yeah.
That's my rule. And the goal is to finish by July the 1st. And so I give myself 6 months. And that's when I'm home, which is most of the time, especially now, all the time. It's 5 days a week. It's from about 7 in the morning till around 11 or 12. Every day without a lot of no wasted time. I have a little.
There's no wasted time. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I have a little office that's behind the main house, and that's where I write. It's dark and quiet, and there's no phone, no fax, no internet, no music. No, it's really a nice place to go into at 7 in the morning with same cup of coffee, same brand of coffee, same really strong coffee, and just it's still after 45 books, it's still quite enjoyable to be able to sit down in the morning and continue a story. The first thing I do is reread what I wrote the day before, because I edit and I catch a lot of mistakes, change a lot of things as I do that daily, but also get you back into the rhythm of the plot and the characters. And when you write suspense, you're looking for ways to make pages turn. You don't want sections of the book to drag or be unnecessary. So I'm always looking for ways to improve and ways to keep the story going faster. And that's then I'll write for 4 hours, and after about 4 hours of nonstop writing, my brain is pretty well mushed.
That's a lot. That's really hard. I mean, I can cook for like 3 hours and I'm just drained.
Yeah.
So
a question about back to your cooking, because I'm fascinated, and I'll say that I've got your book right here because we've been cooking out of it. I think Renee is an excellent cook.
And I have your book.
Renee loves to cook, and so we're always in the kitchen. Our kids are married and gone, so it's just the two of us. And although we now have grandkids, and they come home, and one of their favorite things to do is get in the kitchen with Renee, both of them. Oliver's 4, Margot's 2, and like make chocolate chip pancakes for breakfast. And that's what we do together. And the whole kitchen's totally destroyed, and everybody's in the kitchen. We're all in the kitchen with tons of advice that's not needed or requested. We're all in the kitchen. But when it's just the two of us, we're always looking for some new recipe. I swear, I think Renee has all 12 of your books.
Oh, how wonderful! Thank you.
She probably has 1,000 cookbooks. She has a huge library. They're just stacked all over the kitchen. They're in some shelves, and she's always looking for recipes. She keeps recipes. She has recipes from her grandmother.
Where's she from? What's her background?
North Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina. And it's really kind of odd because I think this is kind of an oddity about that part of the world. The women on her side of the family, her mother, and where they're from around Raleigh, they don't share recipes. And it's almost an insult to ask somebody for their recipe. And I said, Renee, I've never heard of that down south.
Because it's so personal? It's like asking for your clothes?
Yeah. And
Isn't that interesting?
You've never heard that before?
No, I've never heard that before.
I mean,
I've heard of mothers handing down a recipe with a mistake in it so the kids can't make it as well as they can. But I've never heard of that. Renee
will not give our daughter, who is also a really good cook, she has yet to give our daughter her recipe she has a famous chocolate chip cookie recipe that nobody knows but her. It's not written down. And she makes at least 2 batches a month to give away. And we can't eat them all. But she keeps that recipe. The question I was going to ask you, of your, how often do you have a completely original recipe? And I asked that because oftentimes in fancy restaurants you'll look at the dish, and it's way too much detail about what is in the dish or what's on the plate. And I often wonder who thinks of all that, who thinks of the ingredients and what mixes and what doesn't mix. I mean, how do you know you've got an original recipe? Is there such a thing?
I mean, I think there's nothing original anywhere. I think that, in movies, there are certain plots that, the boy meets girl, there's, the challenge of something. They're like 5 great plots, and they're all variations on that. What I try and do is what my cooking is really very different from a restaurant, because a restaurant wants to challenge you and like surprise you in some way. Like, I never thought of putting fennel with scallops or whatever it is, but it's really good together. What my cooking is really home cooking. And I found when I had especially food store, people didn't want to take home fancy food. They wanted to take home roast chicken and roast carrots. So what my goal is always is to take something that's familiar and make it taste better than you think it's going to taste. So if I'm doing beef stew, like in this book, there's an ultimate beef stew. If I'm doing beef stew, I'll take it apart and think, well, most beef stew is kind of boring. So what could I do to make the beef taste better? And it's made with chuck usually. So I replaced it with short ribs, which have so much more flavor, and they're going to flavor the sauce as well. So, and then I'll think, well, what can I do to the sauce? Well, beef bourguignon has red wine and cognac in it. So I'm going to add that to the sauce and see what happens. And remember, to me, it's like a science experiment. I start with one thing and I make it over and over and over again. And I start with something in my head that I'm looking for. And only when I get there will I stop. And sometimes, there's a recipe in this book that took me like 6 or 8 years to get there. But most times 10 or 15 times I'll make something and then I'll just go, that's what I was looking for, and it's done. So I'm kind of looking for something different than new flavors that are more interesting. I'm looking for how to make something taste better than you expect, but still taste like its intrinsic ingredients. So that's always my focus. How can I make carrots taste better? Well, roasting them is better than boiling them, for example, or olive oil, salt, and pepper. And maybe if you add, one ingredient to it, fresh dill is good with it. So it's not something surprising. It's something that you know exactly what it tastes like when you read it.
So who does all of your taste testing?
Me. I will give it to other people and see what they think, or maybe my assistant will prep for me. And when I'm done with it, she goes home and makes it for her family, I know that's a winner. I'm really the only one I trust in terms of what that flavor profile I'm looking for is. So once I hear that little like ping in my head that goes, that's what I'm looking for, I feel like I'm done. And then I want to make the recipe over and over again. And I give it to my assistants, usually 2 or 3 people. One's a beginning cook, one's a intermediate cook, and one's an advanced cook, to see if they have any problems with the recipe, because I want somebody at home to be able to make it.
Yeah.
So what does Renee read your books and say it's a great book, or do you just know? Do you have people read it and confirm or push you to do a different book?
She reads it first. She usually waits. I'll get about halfway through the novel before I make her sit down and read the first half. She's getting kind of bored with my career, though, and my writing. After 45 books, I really can't blame her.
I would say the rest of the world isn't, John, so I wouldn't worry about that.
And then we'll go chapter by chapter until we get to the end. And she's a very good reader. She's not an editor, but she has a real.
You trust her judgment.
Implicitly.
Isn't that great?
She has a real knack for knowing when a plot is working, or when a certain character is not needed, or when something else is needed. She's always very critical of my female characters. When she read when she read A Time to Kill 30 years ago, she said, your female characters really suck. And I said, well, thank you, dear. I appreciate that. She's very blunt. She reads with a big red magic marker that she just loves to overuse. And so we have very healthy discussions as we go through. But again, 2 weeks ago, we sat down. I gave her a 2-page summary for a potential book next year, and she spent some time with it. We sat down and talked about it. It was not a satisfactory conversation as far as I was concerned. So I went back for some more, and I got it. And I realized when I'm having to argue with her about the story or the idea, it's not going to work. So I give it up and then move on.
Sometimes it allows you to justify it too, and really work out the details. One of the things I found, I'm curious if you've had this experience, when I wrote my first book, and it surprisingly was, did really, really well. And my publisher said, I need another book immediately. And I was like, I'm all out of recipes. I can't possibly. And then, I wrote a second book, and I thought, well, that's it. I'm done. And here I am on my 12th book, and I find that I can just sit down and write a list of 100 recipes, ideas of things that I'd like to work on. I'm really surprised that this far down the line, for me, it's only 12 books. How many books have you written? 35?
I think it's 45.
45, wow. That I'm actually, it's easier for me to make up ideas of things I want to work on, rather than, it's kind of like a muscle that you just keep exercising and it just gets better. Do you find that it's easier to make up stories now after all this time, or you feel like you've told so many stories, it's hard?
Honestly, I know when you write what I write about the legal system and injustices and problems and things that should be fixed. And not all books have issues, but the better books have issues. And the best books are the ones I can take a
Yes.
certain issue and weave a suspenseful story around that, and and raise awareness. But there are so many other stories, issues, ideas I see in the newspaper every day,
Yeah.
or we deal with as a nation. For example, the pandemic. I don't plan to write about it, but it's fascinating because there's already the first wave of litigation because some nursing homes got sued because they did not take care of their patients. They
Yeah.
got sued because they didn't take care of their employees.
Mhm.
And I have a buddy who's a very successful businessman, and he had purchased business interruption insurance and paid through the nose for it for years,
Yeah.
and wanted to drop it, but never dropped it. This year, when the pandemic hit, he filed a claim with his insurance company, and then the word pandemic or plague is used in his policy. It's covered, no doubt, it's covered.
Really? Wow.
And the insurance company has denied every claim across the board. So they've all lawyered up. They've all filed lawsuits, these huge lawsuits, multi-million-dollar lawsuits, going after these insurance companies that have so far. I think most of them have paid their claims, but a lot of them have not. Anyway, the litigation is going to be intriguing for years to come.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
of the pandemic. And I'm just going to sit back and cherry pick that and take the best stories and probably write about them. But that's how I get my ideas. And so as you said a while ago, nothing is really original anymore.
Yeah.
It's just your take, my take.
Your take on it.
A new take on an old story or a new story. And with fiction, I can add all the twists and turns I want to add. But no, there's no, I don't see an end anywhere in sight if I stay healthy. I'm having too much fun writing.
Isn't it great? I know. I feel that way too. They're going to drag me out by my feet, and I'll be dragging a pot after me. John, you don't know this because it was a long time ago, but I met you once, and I've been involved with the Innocence Project, and I think it must have been after you wrote An Innocent Man. And did you give a talk at at Peter Neufeld's apartment?
That's where we met.
A long time ago.
That's where we met.
I was there, and it was wonderful. So what was writing fiction? How was writing fiction nonfiction different from writing fiction for you?
It's really a different set of muscles. It's first of all, the huge difference is the research that you have to do. I researched that book off and on for 18 months, and normally I write a novel in 6 months. And I was just overwhelmed. I'm not trained as a journalist. I had no idea what I was doing. And the people who are not portrayed very nicely in the book are still alive, and I expected trouble out of them, and I got it. But because of that, I was very careful about what I wrote. It's a very angry book because it's a very angry story. And
it's a terrible story.
Terrible story. Well,
and there's so many of them.
Every wrongful conviction, and there are thousands of them now, are that we know.
Thousands that we know.
Yeah.
And the Innocence Project can only go back and look at the ones that have DNA. There are so many wrongful convictions where there's no DNA, which is incredible. Yeah. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I probably will not do it again, just because even though I love these stories, the wrongful conviction stories are just, from a storytelling point of view, are just fascinating stories because of the suffering and the heartbreak and the waste of life and the waste of money and the waste of time. These are just, unbelievable stories. And every wrongful conviction deserves its own book, but I can't.
It does.
All right,
really does.
All right, my turn. Okay. Do you know what your next cookbook is going to be? Do you know your next?
I do. I'm 3/4 of the way through it.
Can you tell us?
No. I never say it out loud. I always think it's bad karma to say it out loud. And sometimes, in the process, it change. The idea of it changes. So I do the recipes first and see where it brings me, and then I fill out the information around it. So, so it's January. It's almost January 1st. Do you know what your next book is? It's like, do you know where it's 7:00. Do you know where your children are?
I am almost positive that I have the next book. I'm working on the outline. I would not dare discuss it like you.
Of course, that's what I feel too.
And I tell writers, I tell aspiring writers, I tell students, it's one of my pet peeves about writers. Don't talk about your book. Don't talk your book to death. Just go write the damn thing. And once you have it written, then you have something to talk about. Don't tell everybody what you're doing, because, as you said, it may change, or it may not work.
No, it's out there. It's just out there. People pick up on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, that's one of my pet peeves is hearing people talk about a book they're going to write. Well, shut up and go write it, okay? Then you have something to talk about. How long does it take? How long did it take to write this book?
I have a 2-year cycle. The way you have a 1-year cycle, I have a 2-year cycle. I basically spend a year writing the recipes, year and a half, and then I spend the second year designing the book, doing the photographs, and editing it. So it's a 2-year cycle, and I have a book come out every other October, which is great. It's just wonderful.
Well, speaking of photographs, what's so great about your cookbooks is that every recipe has a gorgeous photograph. And again, I told you we have hundreds of cookbooks, probably thousands, and I really hate the ones where it's just the recipe. I mean, I want to see what it looks like. I want to see what I'm about to eat or what I think she's cooking. I've tried to cook some myself, and it's really, that doesn't work very well. But I love the photography because you know what you're supposed to get when you finish.
I started out with the first book knowing nothing about writing cookbooks. I mean, really nothing. I didn't think it was anything that was going to happen except just one book. And I started out thinking, well, most people are visual. They're not word people. And that if they open a book, they're going to look at the photograph first. So I thought, I want them to look at the photograph and say, that looks delicious. Yeah. And then look at the recipe and say, I can get all those ingredients in the grocery store and I can actually make that. And then when they make it, it looks just like the photograph. It's not like something that's been shellacked with some motor oil or something, that it really is what it is. And to this day, I mean, 12 books later, I still have that same idea in my head that it needs to be, you want to look at the photograph and go, that looks delicious. I want to make it. So
one of our favorite restaurants in New York, probably our favorite restaurant in New York City over the last 25 years was Garten Bar and Grill.
Oh, so great.
That's so great. They closed right before the pandemic hit. And I think they're closed for good now. Alfred Portali sold out, I think last year, a couple of years ago. And I knew Alfred. And anyway, I love to eat there because the food was just so great. But he had these, really complicated presentations. All his dishes were really, so I bought the cookbook one time, the Garten Bar and Grill cookbook. And trying to make one of those recipes is impossible. You can't. I mean, the normal, kitchen chef can't do that. You have to be like someone like Alfred to do it. My point is, with your recipes, we as amateurs, we have a fighting chance to make it look like the photograph. Okay.
Well, the odd thing is when I started writing cookbooks, I thought, what makes me think I can do this? Because I'm not a trained professional chef. I mean, I'm just a home cook that's had more experience than most people. And having run a specialty food store for 20 years, I realized that people don't want fancy food to take home. They want simple roast chicken, salads, things like that to take home, soups. And so once I started writing cookbooks, I realized I really understood how people wanted to eat at home. So that's the difference. I love when you open a chef restaurant cookbook and it has like 2 sheets of gelatin, which you can't buy in a grocery store, and 2 teaspoons of demi-glace, which you can't find anywhere. You have to make it. And then you're in trouble right there. There are some recipes. Somebody told me that there was a restaurant in California that had a wonderful cookbook, and the roast chicken recipe was 4 pages long. And she said it took longer to read that recipe than to make my roast chicken. So, I really try and make it so people can do like home cooking. And you can get dinner on the table.
We're talking about comfort food. Okay.
Thank you.
So where'd the idea come from?
Well, I knew that it was going to come out in the beginning of October, and it was going to come out a month before the election. And that's all I knew. And I thought people are going to be totally stressed out no matter who they're voting for, and they're going to need comfort food. I mean, little did I know there would be a pandemic, there would be racial justice issues, there'd be the Supreme Court, there would be so many layers of stress. And people would be home. They can't even leave home, so they have to cook for themselves. So it turned out to be, the timing turned out to be very good. And I'm glad, because I'm glad people, are connecting with the recipes and, they want to make them, which is what it's all about.
Okay, you can only name one food. What is your favorite comfort food?
My favorite comfort food, just one thing. Can I put 2 things together?
Yes.
Like a tomato soup and grilled cheese sandwich?
Yeah.
That's right up there. What's yours?
Pimento cheese, and we fixed your pimento cheese recipe a couple of weeks ago from this book, and it's delicious. But I just, for some reason, I have a huge weakness for pimento cheese, and that just.
Oh yeah.
My mother made it. That's old-fashioned comfort food.
Oh, that's exactly. Now it's interesting because I didn't really know what it was, and I was giving a talk in Atlanta, Georgia, about 2 years ago, and I'm always asking people what are their favorite comfort foods, and that was one of them. So I just started researching it, and it's really good, isn't it? And that actually originally came from the idea of it came from a cheese shop in Brooklyn called Stinky's, and I suspect they had some roots in the South. Isn't that a great name?
What is your favorite? What's your favorite holiday meal? Do you have one?
Oh yeah, Thanksgiving, hands down. I love Thanksgiving. I love that it's like the traditional things like turkey and some kind of smashed sweet potatoes and some kind of pie. They're like traditional things, but you can make them more interesting. What'd you do for Thanksgiving? Was it just you and Renee?
No, we had the whole bunch.
Oh, good.
Both kids, with everybody, like both kids, both grandkids. So Christmas.
So did you all cook together?
Oh, we stay in the kitchen. We stay in the kitchen. We stay in the kitchen. We start off in the kitchen with the kids, fixing their breakfast because they're going to help cook. The little children are. Somebody's going to start my son-in-law Mike is probably going to start the Bloody Marys and mimosas pretty early in the morning.
I want to come to your Thanksgiving.
There's a lot of expertise around the kitchen, but we stay in the kitchen pretty much the whole time and we plan the next meal. It's traditional. It's turkey and dressing, and then we'll try different. This year we made your was it your kale and broccoli salad?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, your book. We had that this year
with the Caesar dressing.
Yes, we had that. Yeah. And you had a broccolini recipe too, didn't you? We had that.
Yeah, roasted broccolini. Yeah, with lemon. I think with it's roasted. Well, I have a few. One is roasted broccolini, but in this book, it's roasted broccolini with melted cheddar on it.
Yeah.
That's a good one for Thanksgiving. Yeah.
We stick to turkey and dressing, but every year we say, we're getting kind of tired of turkey and dressing. We only do it once a year. But after 60 years, we're kind of tired of turkey and dressing. The kids don't feel that way. The kids want their traditional dishes, and like our son will make a scalloped potato dish, and our daughter will make another dish, and there are 14 different kinds of pies that nobody's going to eat, but they're eating.
Really?
You gotta have them. You got to have a pumpkin pie. Our favorite tradition is that's Thanksgiving, but we have a great Christmas Eve tradition that's probably only about 20 years old, and it comes from the Mississippi Gulf Coast. One of my favorite restaurants in Biloxi is Mary Mahoney's Old French House. It's been there forever, and every year Bob Mahoney, the owner, sends us a Cajun food care package that arrives on December the 23rd, and it's gumbo and crawfish etouffee and jambalaya and shrimp.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we open the gumbo up and put it in a pot on the stove, real low, and then we go to church for our Christmas Eve worship.
And you leave the gumbo on the stove?
Leave it on the stove.
Yeah.
Because we know when we come home, the whole house is going to smell like gumbo. And and we could, sitting in church, we can almost smell the gumbo. And anyway, we get home and we have quail salad, crawfish etouffee, oysters, and Christmas gumbo. We call it Christmas gumbo, and that's become a real tradition.
What a great tradition. That's fabulous.
And then we'll eat on that stuff for the rest of the week. And so, yeah, it's we live in the kitchen. We enjoy cooking. We enjoy wine.
Am I right that we both like? There's a place in Europe that we both like, Paris.
I remember Paris.
You like it as much as I do?
remember Paris. Yeah, we were there September a year ago. We go. We normally go 2 or 3 times a year. Usually once or twice for publishing stuff. The Europeans are. I don't know if you've experienced this, but the Europeans, especially the French and the Germans and the Italians, they want to see, they're big readers, but they want to see the writer. They want to see you
Oh,
there.
that's interesting.
Even if you're a foreign writer, they expect you to be there and
To be there. Oh, that's interesting.
promote the book. And so, we spent a lot of time over there over the years, and really fell in love with Paris 25 years ago. And, we have our favorite little neighborhoods and restaurants, and you live there, right?
Yeah. I mean, we have a little place there that we've had for 20 years. So I was thinking about it because we always spend Christmas and New Year's there. And we kind of have a New Year's tradition that is just inviolate, which we're going to miss this year. But we have friends come, and Jeffrey and I, every year we do a little investigation. This is tough work, but we do it. We go to like 5 or 6 bars and decide which bar we want to go to on New Year's Eve. And so we, like for years we went to the bar at the Maurice where they have a piano player, and we got to know the bartender. And then at 11 o'clock we come back to the apartment, and I always try and make something that I can make really quickly, like capellini with caviar, and scallops Provençal, something like that. And it's just, to me, New Year's Eve in Paris is just heaven, absolutely heaven.
We have talked about Christmas in Paris. It's not going to happen. Renee is not going to be out of her kitchen Thanksgiving and Christmas. She's not going to travel.
Christmas you want to be home, but New Year's Eve in Paris I highly recommend. Maybe one of these days we'll get you to come with us.
Well, we'd love to. She loves to go. Her birthday's early November, and we try to be there every year for a week for her birthday. It's a great time to be in the city. It's not too crowded.
It's great.
We'll go there for publishing once or twice a year, shows or whatever, just any excuse to get there.
I feel that there's something about the French that they really appreciate their lives. They, 2 businessmen sit down at a restaurant and they have a conversation with the waiter about the wine and how the meal is prepared. And they, it's not just something like here, it's just like, bring whatever's the special. But there they really are engaged in appreciating what it is, the craft to put it together, the wine that goes with it. And people just hang out at a cafe. It's an activity, and it's just wonderful. And I feel like we miss that here.
What's your favorite part of the city?
Well, we live right on the border of the 6th and 7th. So that's where we spend most of our time. And when we bought this apartment, I said to Jeffrey, it's going to be great. We'll go to Paris, and then we can take side trips to Egypt, and we can go to Morocco, and we can go to Belgium. And we don't even leave the 6th and the 7th. We've barely even gone to the 11th. So we really kind of hang out in that neighborhood. There's a park in front of our apartment.
You have a favorite restaurant?
Yes, lots of them. Do you know Le Recamier? It's an old-fashioned restaurant that actually the Obamas went there when they went to Paris, and they're very famous for the souffles, just extraordinary. It's in the 7th, right near the Lutetia Hotel, and we tend to like fairly casual restaurants, not fancy big deal restaurants. We like, now I'm forgetting the names of all of them. I don't know why. It's COVID brain. I like Le Paulbert is a wonderful restaurant, very traditional French food. What do you like there?
Our favorite lunch spot is a place called Le Comptoir, which is on the sidewalk.
Love Le Comptoir. Yeah, it's in the 6th.
Wonderful place for lunch. We're the same. We've done the high-end stuff, and I just have no patience with sitting and eating for 3 hours. I don't
either. I feel the same way. I just don't love it.
2 hours max, but you get in one of those really fancy restaurants in Paris, and you can be there for 4 hours. I'm not going to do it, and the money's obscene. I still get frustrated by spending too much money for food. We love the bistros. We love to be able to walk from the hotel or our apartment to there are a dozen neighborhood bistros within 10 minutes. And
do you have an apartment there? So you have a neighborhood that you always hang out in?
Saint-Sulpice by the church.
That's right where we are. Yeah,
that's where we are.
That's great.
We've been there we had an apartment for probably 10 years, and would love to get over more, but life's busy, and now we can't. Americans are not welcome. You can't get in the country now.
Isn't that amazing? It's
we're
amazing.
banned from Europe, but
you know, the good news, it'll still be there when it's over.
yeah, it's
That's
going to
the
be a
best
lot
part.
of fun when we go back. And I have a great French publisher, and the French publishing house is right around the corner from the apartment, and that's kind of our neck of the woods, and we really miss that. But it'll be there when we get
It'll
back.
be back. So should we answer people's questions?
Oh, I forgot about the audience. Yeah.
You know, I was just remembering there's a restaurant right near us that's kind of between you and me that we just absolutely love, Le Cherche Midi. It's an Italian restaurant. I'm sure you go there.
We've been there, yeah.
All the neighborhood people go on Sunday night when they come home from the country.
Yeah.
So do you have audience questions? Nobody's asking us any questions? Oh, we have one here.
I've got one here. It's about my book. The question is, they heard that I said this book is the most personal yet. Is this true? And if so, how so? A Time for Mercy is it's personal in that the character Jake first appeared in 1989, and it's in my first novel, A Time to Kill. And when I wrote that book, starting in 1985, when I was, I guess, 30 years old, I was living pretty much the life that you see in the book. A small town lawyer in Mississippi, struggling to get ahead, to find traction, to get cases, clients, make a good living, pretty wife, having babies, stuff like that. A lot of financial pressures, and dreaming of the big courtroom drama, the big trial that everybody would be watching. That's what I was dreaming of, and I wanted to be an accomplished courtroom lawyer. That was my goal in life in 1985, and for some reason I decided to create this drama and try to write about it. And I had never written before. I had not studied writing. It was not a childhood dream. It was just something that kind of happened. And so as I wrote A Time to Kill, it was basically me thinking like Jake would think, doing what Jake would do, practicing law the way Jake would practice law. And so it was very autobiographical. And the book came out in 1989. It didn't sell.
Didn't sell?
Time to Kill was a total flop. They printed 5,000 hardback copies of A Time to Kill initially, and we couldn't give them away. It didn't go back for reprints or paperback or anything initially. The firm
What
came
changed?
out. The firm changed everything. The firm, for years around our house, we would refer to time as BF and AF, before the firm and after the firm. Because the firm, and it was an astonishing overnight success, and it changed everything. It upended our whole lives, and suddenly I didn't want to be a lawyer anymore. I didn't want to be a politician anymore. I wanted to write full time.
What was different about the firm? Do you know?
It was a really strange deal because we sold the movie rights to Paramount Pictures before we sold the book rights, and so it had a lot of momentum from a publishing point of view. And I think the story resonated. People just loved the idea of, a hotshot law student going to work for a secretive law firm that once you join, you can never leave. And that was had a good hook. And but the firm changed everything. And so,
how interesting.
So I forgot about A Time to Kill. I said, I'm going to write legal thrillers for a while. And I did that for a long time, and then brought back Jake 7 years ago, with Sycamore Row, and then this year, this was a time for Mercy. So it's a very personal. I feel very connected to Jake now. Nothing like I did 30 years ago. It was a long time ago.
And it's so wonderful because we both have the luxury of being able to write whatever we want to write, which is so freeing. But I think also people know it's so authentic to who we are, and that really works in the publishing world. Yeah. Does that sound right to you?
Oh, listen, I count my blessings every day. I've never taken any of this for granted or taken my
not for a minute. Yeah, I feel the same way.
We're both very lucky to be where we are,
Yeah.
We love what we do. We can't believe we get paid for doing this.
Exactly.
And you get to cook and eat all day long. I mean, that's a whole lot more fun than writing a legal thriller. So
we get to live a good life for it, which is wonderful. I mean, it's what everybody's dream is, and we get to live it, which is fantastic.
Okay, what is Anna? What is your favorite recipe from your new book?
My favorite recipe from my new book. That's a tough one. That's like asking which children you like best. I would say it's my favorite, probably black and white. I don't know. It's hard. I think probably the Boston cream pie, because I worked so hard on it. Because I took something that was basically a plain white cake with plain pastry cream and chocolate and made it into something that's really extraordinary. It has orange zest and Grand Marnier, and the chocolate and the vanilla and the orange kind of all layer in a really nice way to make something that's basically fairly simple, but also much more exciting. So that's probably my favorite recipe. Took me like 6 or 8 years to nail it, but I did it.
Okay, here's my question. It's probably a stupid question. If you made that Boston cream pie right now, would you have to look at the recipe?
Absolutely. Yes. I've written probably 1,000, probably more than that, probably more than 1,000 recipes. I can't remember all of them, but I know I would know kind of the order of things. And I would have to know whether, I'm really precise like a scientist, and the difference between a teaspoon of vanilla and 2 teaspoons of vanilla will make a huge difference in my mind about how those flavors go together. So I measure everything carefully. I can't possibly remember every single ingredient.
Well, my biggest transgression in the kitchen, and there are many of them, okay?
Yeah.
I hate to properly measure everything, okay? And
now I know why you do the prep.
Yeah, but she even watches me, she'll tell me to, do something, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, okay? It's freshly squeezed lemon. Okay, well, I'll squeeze a lemon. I don't really care if it's 2 tablespoons or 3. I'm just going to throw it in there. But that's when I really get in trouble, because I hate to be that precise, but you have to, right?
I'm going to get myself in a lot of trouble. You cook like a man. I just find that there's a reason why women are bakers, because they're precise. I measure absolutely everything. I feel that I've just spent probably a month working on a recipe to make sure it's exactly what I want it to be. I'm not going to just start slugging things in because it's not going to come out the way I want it to come out. But men just throw things in. They don't even, actually, a friend of mine said her husband just basically needs a list of ingredients and a suggested idea. That's all he's going to follow. So
here's a question from David Gernert.
Okay.
David is one of my closest friends because he's my agent.
Oh, good.
David bought the firm in January of 1990 when he was an editor at Doubleday, and he bought the firm, hardcover, softcover, North American rights. And Renee and I could not wait to fly off to New York to meet Doubleday, my new publisher, and have lunch with David. So David and I have been together for 30 years.
Yeah.
He's now my agent. The question is for you, though. It's a great question. What is your favorite recent cookbook other than yours?
Oh, that's a tough one. Wow. Other than mine, a recent cookbook. There's a woman whose name is Claire Kafertz, who wrote a book called Dessert Person, which is a fabulous baking book. There's a woman who's baking. It's a really good book. I have so many. I'm just like Renee. I probably have 1,000 cookbooks, and they're just piled up everywhere. So all I have to do is look around and see what I have. There's so many books here. But I also go to I go to antique booksellers and find old cookbooks because I want to see the idea of a recipe from 1940, and then just kind of backfit it and see if I can make a modern recipe out of it.
I found a cookbook last week. Have no idea where it came from or how long we've had it. It's called Lunch in Provence. And
I love that book already.
Well, how can you go wrong? And it's this, primarily one chef, and he's talking about recipes, and some of the photography is just gorgeous. And early in the book, he has this beautiful little table set ready for lunch. And he said that every day he and his wife have a very light lunch together at the table, that table, with a glass or two of wine. And I showed that to Renee and I said, this is what I want out of life, okay? Let's sit down somewhere and have a very light lunch with 2 glasses of wine every day. I can't talk her into drinking at lunch if we're not traveling. So but it's a beautiful cookbook, the photography.
Is it a new book?
I think it's new. It's
Oh,
called
good.
Lunch
Oh, that's great.
Lunch in Provence. Okay, another question. Any chance we might see Grisham on Barefoot Contessa? I'd love to see that Christmas gumbo.
That would be great. Can you come make it with me? I think you get the Christmas gumbo. You don't actually make it, right?
No, I don't make it. I wouldn't know how. No, listen, I do not belong in your kitchen. I will be there. I'll be on this side where those bar stools are. I'll be on the bar stools right there behind you.
Send Renee. She can cook with me because I know she measures.
Here's a great question from Angela Ash for both of us. If the writing had not worked out, what would we be doing instead?
Oh, that's a good question. I know what I'd be doing. What would you be doing?
I probably would be. I'd probably be a judge. I was getting tired of the grind of practicing law every day, and if the firm had not worked out, and I told Renee when I finished The Time to Kill and the book flopped, and I said, okay, I'm going to write one more book. And if the second book doesn't work, you can forget this little secret hobby. I'll just get back. I'll just stay in the office and sue people. That's what I'm supposed to do anyway. And so that was what I would have stayed and slogged it out as a lawyer in a small town. But I was already thinking about maybe becoming a judge, running for a judge's position with a nice guaranteed salary, and I probably would have done that. I think I could have won because I'd already been elected in politics. And then probably, they would have probably put me ready at the age of, 50 or so to maybe become a federal judge under Obama, probably 2008, 2016, something like that. That was kind of I was thinking down the road. And looking back, that's what I probably would have been jockeying to do, would become a federal judge. You can't campaign for that. The jobs are hard to get. But that was what I was thinking when the firm hit. My
guess is you wouldn't have an apartment in Paris from that schedule, right?
Probably
the good news is you wouldn't have time to go either.
I would not. What would you be?
Well, the other thing that I love to do, and I've always done it from the time that I worked in the government, is I like to buy old houses and renovate them. And I actually, when I bought my specialty food store from an ad in the New York Times, my thought was I would either go into the food business or I would go into architecture or design or something like that, because I've always loved that. And the whole time that I've been writing cookbooks and running my store, the first 20 years and the 20 years I've done this, I've always had a project that I was working on. My concern about it is I just didn't want to have a client. When you're an architect, you have a client and they say, no, I want orange or purple or whatever it is. And I'm like, no. So I think I went into a business where I could control things and I could do it the way I want to. But I've always continued doing design things because I just love that challenge, taking an old house and figuring out what to do with it, or an old building and renovating it. So that's what I would be doing. And
you still do that occasionally?
I do it all the time. Yeah, I've always got a project. If I don't have a project, I'm like, what am I going to do with myself? I like to have something beside work that I'm thinking about, some puzzle I'm trying to work out. So yeah, I've always done that. I did it. And it's actually how I think we made enough money from the projects I did in Washington when I was in the government to buy my store. So that worked out really well.
Okay, here's a related follow-up from Ashley Albarico. It's to you. What was the major turning point in your career where you went from being in the White House to being a beloved celebrity, not just a celebrity, but a beloved celebrity and cookbook author? What was the major turning point? What was your lucky break?
My lucky break was, well, there was 20 years in between, so that it wasn't exactly an overnight success. When I left the government and I ran a specialty food store in East Hampton for 20 years. I think at some point I thought, okay, kind of like you felt about the law practice. I'd done it. It was fine. I had a great time, but I really needed more of a challenge. And I think my lucky break was meeting a friend who's a therapist who said to me, type A people think that they know how to do what they're going to do next while they're doing something, but they don't. They really need to just stop and get really bored and just do nothing for a while. And that's how they figure it out. And I thought, I don't know what she's talking about, but it sounded interesting. So I sold the store and spent a year in an office in town, just trying to figure out what to do. I was invest in the stock market. I was going to start a bus company. I was going to renovate old house. I didn't know what I was going to do. And then one day, out of sheer desperation, because I literally had nothing to do, I thought, Jeffrey said to me, stay in the food business. You really like the food business, but do it in a different way. And I thought, well, I'll write a cookbook. Nobody's going to buy my cookbook, but I'll write a cookbook and, at least I'll have something to do while I figure out what I'm doing next. And that book turned out to be a bestseller. And I just had, it was just the way your second book came out. I just had no idea that A, writing cookbooks was going to be so interesting, and B, that I would be able to do it well, and that it would create another life for me. So at the time when I sold the store, I thought, well, my life is over. I've done the most interesting thing I'm going to do, but let me just find something to do. It turned out that the time I spent at the store was really just preparation for what I'm doing now and what I should have been doing all along. So I think that was the big surprise. And you just, I always say this, you just have to jump in the pond. You just have to get there like you did. You wrote a book, it didn't sell, you didn't give up. I mean, the tenacity of it is just extraordinary.
It really is. And you learn, and again, this is what I try to avoid giving advice because it's easy to give and even easier to ignore. But I do get a lot of questions from aspiring writers, and there are a lot of aspiring writers and students about, what's the most important thing that makes it work? How do you get published the first time? And there's no magic, silver bullet anywhere. You have to be able to write. And if you can't write, you're not going to get anywhere because you're going to be rejected. You have to be able to handle the rejections and persevere past that, because all writers can tell great stories about being rejected. A Time to Kill was rejected about 30 times.
Seriously?
Yeah,
Wow.
by about 15
Amazing.
agents and about 15 publishers, and at least 30 times. And we didn't give up. But perseverance.
I think it requires, I feel like you have to believe in yourself, because if you don't believe that you're compelled to do this, nobody else is going to. And can I just say, I'm so grateful that you believed in yourself to keep doing it, because we love your books. Can I just say thank you so much to everybody for joining us. It was just been such a pleasure to talk to you, John. I just loved it.
Well, listen, you and I will keep writing. If they keep reading, we'll keep writing. Okay.
Okay, that's a deal. And tell Renee to keep cooking.
Will.
I love that you're the beneficiary. Thank you so much. It was just such a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks to Barnes & Noble, and thanks to all the staff there. Thank you, guys.
And don't forget to buy John's book.
Don't forget to buy
It's a really good book.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.